5 speakers talking about collaboration. We'll just give it another minute or so to let people in the door, so to speak. You'll notice on the screen, once again, we're using Slido today. Howard will take you through that in a moment, but you might want to just sign in, slido.com, and then use the code LM260321. That will probably be a help. I think because we've got such a packed program, Howard, I think we'll get underway. So a very good afternoon to you all. My name is Andrew Carpenter. I am Chief Executive of both the Structural Timber Association and Constructing Excellence in the Southwest and the Midlands. And we're joined now as co-hosts for these webinars by the rest of the Constructing Excellence family around the UK, and also by the CIOB in the Southwest. So 10 organisations now working together to bring these regular webinars along for you. Delighted today that we're going to be talking about collaborative working. Speakers talking about collaboration. I'm getting some feedback now. But just give it have you turned that recording off, Abraham? We're going to be talking about what is in effect CE's DNA, which is collaborative working. But before I introduce the speakers, I'm just going to hand over to Howard, who's going to take us through some house rules and also a survey. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew, and good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, we're going to be using Slido again. So for those of you who haven't yet used Slido, most people put it onto their phone. Now we're going to be using Slido in 3 ways. We're going to be having a survey in a minute. The survey I'll take you through. We're going to be using it for questions and answers. So if you have any questions you want to put to the speakers, please use Slido. But do carry on using the chat. You're welcome to put in who you are, where you're from, so that other people in the room have a view of who else has joined them. So in terms of any questions you have, please again use the chat for us. But when I say questions, that's just technical sorts of things. But in Q&A, please use Slido. We'll also have a poll at the end, which we'll leave open after the webinar is finished. We would appreciate your feedback on how you felt things have gone today. So I'm going to now ask if we can put Slido up, Abraham. So you should find on your phones, you will have the questions, but I'll just run through them all. Now, the questions today are all on stars. So 1 is low, 10 is high. So the first question is, how well do you consider you understand collaborative working? Your choice. Please put the stars and then enter it. So the next question we'll have up, please. How well do you rate clients on their willingness? Now, we're using the word willingness here, so you need to think on what you would score that as. And in terms of the next question, advisors and consultants. And the next question be on contractors as to how you would rate their willingness. The next question is how well you would rate suppliers on manufacturers on their willingness to actually collaborate. Someone's already completed the whole lot, so you can see what's happening. How would you rate your clients on their ability to collaborate? So there is a difference between willingness and ability. So we'd appreciate your view on that. How well would you rate advisors and consultants on their ability to collaborate effectively? So again, it's ability here we're scoring. And how would you rate contractors on their ability to collaborate effectively? And then how would you rate suppliers and manufacturers on their ability? Now we come on to question which is Andrew will cover later, which is on the principles of effective collaboration. So here the first question is on the 6 principles of effective collaboration. From your experience, please rate the early involvement of all the parties. So do all the parties get involved from your experience early enough? So the next question is, on the 6 principles of effective collaboration, what did you rate common processes and tools? So do you all have common processes and tools? On the next question, it's now about rating the measurement of performance. So from your experience in collaboration, do you rate or do you actually measure performance? On the next question, when it comes down to collaboration, are people selected by value? On the principles of effective collaboration, what's your experience when it comes to forming long-term relationships? And lastly, and thanks for your patience here and for your information, what about aligned commercial relations? From your experience, please rate aligned commercial relationships. Now, if you haven't completed it now, don't worry, the poll will stay there and we will give you the results and answers that you've given later on. So thanks very much. I'm now going to pass back to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Howard. Just by way of introduction to what we're going to be talking about today, those of us that have been involved with constructing excellence since the mid-90s, collaboration has always been at the heart of everything we do. I'm delighted to say that the recent reports of Mark Farmer and Dame Judith Hackitt, and more recently the Construction Playbook and the Value Toolkit, once again talking about the need for the culture of construction to change and for us to be more collaborative. And I think that's been particularly shown in the last 12 months, how well, in fact, we can collaborate in terms of the Construction Leadership Council during COVID-19. So the background to this hour session actually goes back to one of these webinars we held in the autumn. And we were talking about the roadmap to recovery. And I asked the question of those in the room, what's going to prevent us from actually achieving the roadmap to recovery? And Jane O'Leary was in the room at the time working for Vale of Glamorgan Council, and actually made a comment that really stuck in my mind. Jane said that the industry knows the word collaboration, but actually doesn't understand it. And in the main, hasn't got the behaviours and culture to be able to deliver collaborative working. So that got Steve Green, Marc Preite and myself thinking, because we'd actually sat a course, a diploma about 10 or 11 years ago on the subject of collaborative working in the construction industry. The irony is that we'd sat this diploma, level 5 diploma 10 years ago. And after us sitting it, it just sat on the shelf and has done nothing. So following Jane's comments, we got it down off the shelf, we dusted it off and we updated it. And we thought there's a lot of relevance today in terms of what we could and should do in support of all these industry initiatives. So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But I think before we do that, I've invited Jane back, who actually has moved on, is now with ISG. I'm not sure whether that's poacher turned gamekeeper or gamekeeper turned poacher, but I'll let you decide that, Jane. But I thought it was of benefit just to set the scene. So I've asked Jane if she would just sort of establish the initial need. So over to you, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for that introduction. I think, as Andrew said, the pandemic has really challenged our way of life and our industry. And what we've seen through the pandemic is some absolutely fantastic examples of collaborative working. We've only got to look at the Nightingale hospitals to see how we can work collaboratively. And what we need to do is to do more of this. And collaboration has to be our new normal going forward. But to do that, we have got to change culturally to do things differently. We need early contractor involvement. We need honest and transparent procurement. We need a true commitment to social value. And importantly, we need contractors and clients to work collaboratively with shared objectives and common core values. And I don't think there's anything that any of us could argue about any of that. But in order to be able to do that, what we've got to do is give people the skills and tools to enable them to do that. And I think that's where today fits in. What we've got to do is change the conversations that we're having. We need to be procuring for the life of the building and not just for the here and now. And I really, really do believe that the only way as an industry that we can effectively challenge these key issues that we've got is to work collaboratively. It is a word that we all know and we all use, but we've actually all got to absolutely embed that in everything we do. So that's the reason that I think this is really important. Thank you, Andrew.
Jane, thank you very much. A very good explanation of the need. You mentioned in your presentation, very timely, and I don't think we asked you to do so, but you mentioned the Nightingale Hospital, which leads us perfectly into Rob Faro from Clarke. Now, Rob was one of the supply chain that worked on the Exeter Nightingale Hospital. So we've invited Rob to come along just to give us a little bit of a snapshot in terms of a case study. So Rob, over to you.
Good afternoon, and thanks for allowing me to join this, Andrew. I'm just going to share my screen and try and get the technology to work, because this will be a little easier with some images. So I'm Rob Faro. I'm Director for UK South at Clarke, one of the UK's largest building services contractors, and another part of my remit is looking after healthcare for the group as well. Back in the beginning of the pandemic last year, we got involved in the Nightingale Hospital in Exeter via BAM as the main contractor under the P22 framework. Exeter was slightly different to the rest of the Nightingales. It was a hybrid hospital rather than a field hospital, and the way I describe that is it's basically a miniature real hospital with all the facilities you would expect in a acute hospital, not just rows of beds in a tent or in a warehouse. And that project was an experience for us of what I believe is real collaboration. And just a little bit of information about the project to give you an idea of what it was. We turned an existing home-based store into a hybrid hospital over the course of 6 weeks. A huge infrastructure project for us, the M&E services for the infrastructure. In the course of 6 weeks, we designed, delivered and commissioned £6.5 million worth of M&E work, covering 5,000 square metres of building, both existing and off-site manufactured building as well. Peaked at 160 operatives on site and about 103,000 hours worked. Huge amount of infrastructure. I won't go through the list. I'm sure this presentation will be available afterwards, but some significant pieces of kit involved and real collaboration with suppliers, manufacturers and the whole supply chain from all around Europe during that 6 weeks. So onto the collaboration element itself. It was a different job for us. The only way you can deliver for us £6.5 million worth of M&E work, and for BAM and the rest of the supply chain, I think circa £16 million worth of construction work, was to work together. Everybody had common goals. It was helped by the pandemic because everybody wanted to do it. Everybody wanted to achieve something for the community. Everybody was honest with each other. There was very little disagreement, the odd heated moment, as you can imagine, on a 6-week project of that scale. A lot of flexibility, and procurement was very, very straightforward. It was, can you do the job? We need you now, and no long drawn out procurement process. Did that affect the time, cost, quality triad? I don't think so particularly. It was delivered quickly, as we know. quality of the installation was very, very good. There were some compromises on compliance with HTMs because you just can't deliver a brand new hospital that quickly. But cost-wise, it was significantly lower per square metre than a hospital that we're looking at now. The compliance was not that much lower than the price. In comparison to that, we've moved on to a very, very similar project, slightly smaller in fact, where we're working on it's very similar in its type of work and type of installation in healthcare. The job is going to be about 60 weeks to completion, but only 12 weeks on site. The rest of it is design and procurement. There's been an awful lot of pricing and design. We've designed and priced the job 16 times. Cost of 400k just for that process, and about 50% of that is abortive. There's a massive blame culture with even the smallest errors. There's a lack of communication at times, and the impact on that time cost quality triad is much more negative than that of the Nightingale. It's a more expensive project per square metre for virtually the same services. The budget's under pressure. Lots of letters and early warning notices flying around, and it's just an example of one extreme to the other around collaboration. And for me, it's just, how do we learn the lessons from the Nightingales, and have we already forgotten what we did well there? That's it for me. Thank you, Andrew.
Rob, thank you very much. And if ever there was a stark warning, I think that last slide probably shows it. Now, it's not often that I get the chance to present at these webinars. I'm normally hosting them. However, today is an exception. I've got a few slides which I would like to share with you. So hopefully I can go to my sharing and somewhere go from the start. He says, hopefully. So there we go. Hopefully you can all see that, ladies and gents. So we've called today's webinar Collaboration in a Post-COVID-19 World, Myth or Legend. And I suppose Rob has probably answered that already in the last few slides. I've called these few slides that I'm presenting on, Have I Got Construction News for You? So over the years, there's a lot of historic reports that I've mentioned that some of us have been working on since the mid-90s, from Latham and Egan right through to Mark Farmer's report in 2016 and the Hackitt Review in 2018. And within Constructing Excellence, we've used all of these to determine our future. But the DNA of Constructing Excellence and all of those working within it is collaborative working. And I think certainly if you look at the Hackitt Review, which is the most recent of these, you'll notice that culture is very much back as a priority. And even if we look this year at the construction playbook and the value toolkit, again, we're talking the principles of CE that we've been working alongside for 2.5 decades. So you've been answering questions already this afternoon about what CE considers to be the 6 critical success factors for collaborative working. And the first one is definitely early involvement. But not just early involvement of the contractor, early involvement of the whole supply chain. I'm going to take you back to 1996 when I first learned about this. That was just after the Latham report. And I was invited by the Ministry of Defence, HLM Architects and John Lang, as they were at the time, to get involved in the Joint Services Command Centre at Shrivenham. I was working for a company called Forticrete, and we were going to provide all the external architectural masonry. It was an order value of about £1 million. So I was therefore considered to be a very important part of the supply chain. And they brought me into the design discussions 3 years before it was going to site. Now, I can assure you as a product manufacturer, this is absolutely unheard of. Normally, I was invited to quote about 6 weeks before my product was needed because the contractor could keep my prices as low as possible. But what I found to my amazement was actually that I was involved as a key member of the design team. And at the first design meeting, because the product I was promoting was of a better value than the norm, sorry, not better value, better quality, I was able to remove shelf angles from the whole of the project at double the distance. So they halved the shelf angles on the site, and that saved £160,000 just in that first design meeting that we attended. Now, if I tell you that my order value was about £1 million to my company, and okay, the buyer would have probably screwed me down 6 weeks before he wanted the product and got 5%, maybe even 10% out of me. So would have made 50,000 or maybe 100,000. But in that first involvement I'd saved them 160,000. So I immediately saw the value to the client. But actually, when we did get on site in 1999, I actually got list price for my product. So I didn't have to give away 50,000 or 100,000 because I was getting what was agreed in the partnership. And that was the first thing I'd seen, the first example of a win-win situation. And I've been sold on collaborative working ever since, because I've seen it for myself. I've seen the client save 160,000 plus, and I've seen me as a manufacturer save between 50 and 100,000 by getting the correct price for the product. That's the win-win, and that's why I believe early involvement of the whole supply chain is absolutely essential. The second thing is selection on value. We all know this. We all know what we should be doing, that it should be best value and not lowest price. And yet, for 25 years, I've sat in constructing excellence meetings in the morning, and the captains of industry have banged the table and said, yes, we agree with this. And yet in the afternoon, I've put my Forticrete hat on, and I've been beaten uphill and down dale by people within the same business who are just interested in the price. And until we get that right, we're not going to get the culture we need. And if you want to see the very worst of procuring on lowest price, you've got to look no further than what happens at Grenfell. The third thing is to get alignment with common processes and tools, and this is things like BIM. And certainly those of us within CE, I think we consider BIM to be a vehicle for delivering collaborative working, because BIM doesn't stack if you haven't got collaborative working. So that's a tick in the box. But the fourth thing is about measurement of performance. It's about having KPIs. So what we don't want to do is go back to the old days of when I joined the industry, when it was a bit like an old pals act, where you just use people because you knew them, because they were friends of yours. And there was a lot of things going on then which were not acceptable, which is one of the reasons we began to move to the situation we're in now. But like all things, we've probably gone too far. So it's not a cozy relationship. What we have to make sure is that every relationship along the supply chain is measured and it's performing well. But with the long-term relationship in number 5 comes the continuous improvement. So 4 and 5 go hand in hand. It's important that we work collectively and collaboratively to improve the relationship of the whole supply chain towards the end client's needs. And the last thing is to make sure that we use modern commercial contracts. We need to start thinking about the contracts that we put in place. Procurement will always drive behaviours. Until we get that contract right, then we won't get the behaviours and culture that we need within. And I always say to clients that you get the construction industry you deserve, because the contracts that you provide dictate the behaviours throughout the supply chain. So that's a clear point for me, and we'll come on to that later. So you might say that this is where we are at the moment in the UK construction industry. I couldn't possibly comment, but what I can say is that if you do think that, then it's constructing excellence that's going to provide the paddle. And the message is, which is going to be espoused shortly by Stephen and Mark, is that we want to work with people who want to improve the world. Now I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to ask Abraham if he would just show a short video, which I think shows what I was saying earlier about how well the construction industry has performed in the last 12 months under the fabulous leadership of the CLC. So over to you now, please. Thanks, Abraham. So those few seconds, I think, indicate the huge manner that the construction industry has come together under the CLC in the last 12 months, how impressive it is. So if we can do it for 12 months, why can't we do it forever? And I think Rob's example is a case in point where we need to take the knowledge and the best practice that we've gained and make sure that we embed it going forward. I'm going to ask Steve and Mark in a moment just to say a few words about what we think is a solution. But before I do that, Howard, can I hand back to you for the results of the survey, please?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. It's absolutely great. 27 people have participated in this, so that's a very good representation of the number in the room. So Abraham, if we can put the results up, let's run through them. Just wait for, if we can be patient whilst it comes up on the screen. Okay, so we asked the first question, how well do you consider you understand collaborative working? So let's have a look. So the average score is 8. So about 80% of people in the room think that they understand collaborative working. So that's a really good sign, I think. Okay, so the next question. So this is now about clients' willingness. So it's just under 60% at 5.9, but it's a fair range. Now, it probably represents, if we've got some clients in the room who have a different view from others, but nonetheless, 5.9 begins to go down. Quite interesting. So this is their willingness. Okay, so let's have a look at the next one, which comes down to advisors and consultants. So it's viewed that advisors and consultants are more happy, more willing to work collaboratively together. But look at the range that goes from 3 all the way through to 10. So there's quite a diverse view within the room on willingness of advisors and clients. So let's move on to now contractors. And this again is about willingness. 62, but again, a very interesting range between 3 and 9, with two stacks at 5 and 8. So still quite a lot to improve in that area. And the last one on willingness will be manufacturers and suppliers. Interestingly here, 66%. Maybe we have more suppliers in the room, have a positive view. But the range goes from 3 through to 9, but some quite interesting stacks around 8 or 9. Super. Thanks very much. So the next one is ability, which 2 different things. You can be willing, but are you able? So let's have a look. So clients' ability, average score 5.3, but 19% and 15% at 3 and 4. So clients, area for improvement, okay, ability to actually collaborate. The next one, please, which is looking at ability to collaborate from advisors, consultants. Average 6.1, but a big peak at 7. But still the range is quite interesting of the view in the room. 11% and 11% at 3 and 4, so 22%, quite a long way down. Okay, next one, please. Contractors. Interestingly, a big peak on the 7, 33%, but again, the range is quite wide with an average score of 6, which if we look at it is 60%, all of these average scores. So certainly room for improvement in collaboration. And lastly, on collaborating effectively, ability, suppliers and manufacturers. Interesting, the difference between willingness and ability has gone down a bit here, with the majority sticking around the middle, but the range 3 to 9 still quite wide. Okay, so now we're going to go into Andrew's and the Constructing Excellence 6 principles, which will be quite interesting. Early involvement averages sticks around 6.1, but the range goes all the way from 15% down at 3, all the way up to 11% at 10. So quite a diverse view of experience on early involvement. So the next one then on the 6 principles. Oh, wow. We go down here, common processes and tools. So we've got people scoring 2s and 3s, 23%, and 19% on the average. So, but look at the range, 2 all the way through to 10. So a very diverse view here, but certainly collaboration around common processes and tools would be really a big key area to look at. Okay, the next one, please. So now we have measurement of performance. And after all, that's a key thing. Are we performing well collaboratively? Average score 5.2. The range here, we start at 1 all the way through to 10. So there's a very diverse view in the room here. So a real interesting statistic to look at. Okay, so let's move on to the next principle, please, Abraham. Selection by value, an interesting one here, 5.6. But again, the range goes from 2 all the way through to 10, with the highest being at 4. So, yeah, maybe that's an interesting thing to consider, particularly with Rob's points. Okay, the next one, please. And long-term relationships. So in other words, are people from your experience in creating long-term relationships, which could form future collaborative projects rather than looking at maybe contracting or tendering? Range 2 all the way through to 10, 6.6. Yeah, peak at around 6. So I think what we've got out of this is some really interesting data, Andrew, which I'm sure will be interesting to discuss. And lastly, around aligned commercial arrangements. So here we just hit halfway, with really the range going from 1 to 10, with a 9 being avoided, but someone's scoring at 10. So do we have optimists in the room or do we have pessimists? So Andrew, I think it's back to you, and okay, hopefully this will cause some discussion. Really interesting.
Thank you very much. Someone's commented, Linda, to say it would be interesting to have some more in-depth questioning. It would indeed, and we intend to do that, but I have to say that for the purposes of this webinar, we needed to keep it short and sharp. But the information that you've given us already actually leads into the next 2 short presentations really well. I spoke at the beginning about Jane having given us the idea to get this diploma off the shelf, dust it down, update it, because we see this as the solution. And I think the results of the survey actually indicate that there's a real need for people to better understand collaborative working. There's a lot of people talking about it, but actually not walking the walk. So what we're hoping to introduce this September is a diploma in collaborative working in construction that the whole supply chain can actually adopt, undertake, and then come out with the tools and techniques, behaviours and culture that they need to actually work collaboratively. We've got 2 speakers, which will be followed by a Q&A and discussion. If you've got any questions, ladies and gents, from what you've heard already, or indeed what you're about to hear, please go onto that Slido and ask them. That would be much appreciated. And again, I'm just going to mention, if you do want a CPD certificate for today's session, I've put the code in the chat box. So I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to give a brief overview of the diploma. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marc Preite. I'm one of the board members with Constructing Excellent Midlands, and I've had the pleasure of delivering collaborative service improvement programs, both within a client and as a consultant, embedding myself into other clients. I have the challenge of going through the principles of collaboration and integration in about 7 minutes. Andrew has asked me to do some tight timelines, but this one is by all means the shortest. So I am going to show information that you guys have probably seen before, but that's because for me the message is consistent and hasn't changed. So just give me 2 ticks while I get my tech working. So here we go. So myth or legend is an interesting question. Is it a myth because it's something that we believe is out there but actually isn't, or is it a legend because it is and people are doing it? So I've had the opportunity to ask people questions on what they think collaboration is. And some of these are actual answers that I've been given. So it's just BIM, or it's BIM software. It's a contract. It's a particular way to procure. And I don't particularly like the ones where where they are quite blunt about it. So it's not beating your contractor with a stick, it's sitting around a table with biscuits, giving the customer what they want. And more importantly, which is where the kind of subject matter came from today, is it's a myth, because people always revert back to adversarial type. I don't have an argument with any of those. What I will do is I will give what I believe the answer to be, and obviously what Constructing Excellence believe the answer to be. So it's a culture, an ethic, a set of behaviours, skills and tools that allow a team to achieve maximum value and minimum waste for mutual benefit with accepted risk. CE brand it with working together in a seamless team to common objectives that deliver benefit for all through mutually beneficial, including commercial alignment. And both of those for me are true. And they are true, as I've said before, because I've delivered them both of those explanations with clients in multiple guises. So how, or the successful factors, it builds obviously on the 6 that Andrew have already talked about, that are the DNA of Constructing Excellence. So for me, the big one, and where a lot of projects can fail, is that we don't define and understand the need, or the value, more importantly, early enough on, or that clients don't actually know what the value is to them. You know, we talk about how the benefits can go through a project from CapEx to OpEx into BizX, as we call it, and obviously the ratios against those. And this is a slide and a diagram that has been shown for multiple years, especially the last 10 that I've been involved in these sorts of cultures and behaviours. Obviously, the value toolkit really demonstrates and helps and benefits this part of those success factors, and that's why we're including it in the diploma that Steve's going to talk to you about in a bit more detail in a sec. But setting those objectives and those goals and the best strategies to achieve them at the beginning. We need to accept that the traditional processes are flawed, and why they're flawed. The barrier between design and construction or contract, and the difficulties that bring. And Andrew goes back, you know, we go back to Andrew's examples of getting that early engagement and getting those specialists and that knowledge around the table early enough on to make sure that those benefits are realised early enough on, and that they don't obviously affect the change or the costs associated with change later on in the project. Understanding the part played by procurement, again, to further what Andrew has said, there are still so many people out there that are doing single stage open market tendering. And even when a client or a project is set out with best intentions on procurement, ultimately they do quite often revert back to that cheapest price target nature. I've been involved in multiple projects where we've set off on best foot, we've done early engagement, we've done pre-construction service agreements, etc. But actually, ultimately, because of the constraints that are then put on by a client or by the project itself, we've had to revert back to that traditional type. So ensuring that procurement is a very early conversation and not something that is brought in at, you know, kind of design stage 3 or 4, where we go, oh, okay, we need somebody to deliver this now. Get that expertise around the table early. Value. We talked about value at the beginning, and obviously the value toolkit will go on it further. But for me, value is also ensuring what the customer is willing to pay for. We're not talking about price, we're talking about cost. Okay, and also how we have to get to that. So what enables that value to be added, and also what have we as an organisation, as a process, as statutory requirements put in place that actually create waste within that process, and actually then causes a cost or a price that we're not actually really wanting to pay for. So understanding value, enabling that value, and removing the waste is critical in the objectives and the setting of a value early on. That then obviously directly relates to cost, price, and understanding value. Okay, and how, when you look at it from an enabling and a waste and a risk point of view, how this diagram sets out where that value can be really looked at, and how you utilize those savings and how everybody can benefit from all of those. One of the key things for me as as a case study was the bottom of this diagram where we talked about profit and ring fence. It's one of the big subjects, and a lot of people are very protective over it. And when I was working for a retirement housing association, and we were setting out on our good to great program, as it was called, which was when I first started to learn and practice lean and collaborative working. Once we'd actually got over the conversation of profit and ring fencing it, and I was able to actually say to our contractor, look, tell me how much you need to earn, how much you forecast to earn from this 12-month project. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to ring fence that, and I want to give it you up front. And once I've done that, you're then in a better position to talk about cost as opposed to talking about price. It took us 3 months to get there. They didn't want to talk about it at all, but once we had, and we got over that boundary and we removed that, and they realized that there was a mutual gain for everybody here because we weren't talking about price, we were talking about cost. Then the conversation and the results that benefited from it were amazing. So that's one of the principles that we have to get over. We have to embrace this. It's a culture, it's an ethic, it's a behavior. We have to embrace it, and that's everybody embracing it. This is not just about a project manager or a contracts manager. It has to be a shared vision and leadership across all of the organizations and across all of the tiers and across all of the people within those. Okay, and we go back to those 6 that Andrew mentioned earlier. But the collaborativeness has to be across the board. We don't want to do all this hard work and then get a barrier by, for example, and no offense to anybody, a financial director or a HR department. It has to be a whole buy-in. I always use the term, this is not about dipping your toe in and seeing what it's like. This is about having a good jump in and having a really good swim around. So myth or legend? Well, for me, it's legend. It's been done. It's being done. It should be done, and as far as I'm concerned, its benefits are real and enlightening, and it certainly changed the way that I look at projects and the way that I deliver and collaborate through my working life. So the next question is, if it is legend and it can be done, then how do we do it? So I'm going to pass on to Steve, and Steve's going to tell you how we are going to help do it via our diploma.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay. So the nuts and bolts of the diploma. So we've created a brochure. Hopefully this will be available within the next week, maybe 2, from the CE website, so you can download this and get into more of the detail of what I'm going to tell you about now. But basically, the diploma consists of 12 modules. The plan is to deliver that. Well, I'll come on to the nuts and bolts of delivery later, but starting in September, so 12 modules, each module delivered by a different tutor, and these are tutors that have created the learning material based on what they do in their day job. So these are tried and tested techniques in things like collaboration, leadership, supply chain, lean tools, sustainability, offsite. So that the sort of traditional collaboration tools, but we've also linked those with things, and it's been mentioned a few times already, the value toolkit, the construction playbook, and we've got the likes of sort of Anne Bentley from Ryder Levitt Bucknell delivering that. So that's the spread, and we mapped what we were going to deliver against what we believe are the current drivers in the industry: zero carbon, social value, and digital technologies. And I think you'll agree we've got a pretty good spread in terms of where we think the industry needs to go and the subject matter that we're offering here. So the course delivery, what does it look like? So as I said, we're planning to start in September with 1 interactive module each month. We'll deliver it by Zoom, and we're starting in September. Obviously, we should be coming out of lockdown by then, but I think we're going to start delivering the sessions via Zoom, but over the course of the 12 months, we'd hope to have some face-to-face sessions in there. Because from my experience from collaborative training, you can't underestimate the benefit of sitting cheek by jowl with your client, with your consultant, with your supply chain, talking about the same subject. I'll quickly go back to the Birmingham Construction Partnership. We'd introduced the NEC form of contract, and to sit in a room with everyone affected by the contract, going through clause by clause. And when you come from a contractor's background and almost got tunnel vision, it was really enlightening to see how different people interpreted different clauses. So the Zoom session will be half a day. It'll be followed by the need for homework and background reading, but it will give you an immediate opportunity. You know, you can be on the session in the morning, and in the afternoon, introduce some of the tools and techniques that you've learnt in the morning. Overall, it'll be about 10 hours per module, with the learning in the morning and then the homework. And the cost is £2,500 per delegate for the 12 sessions across the 12 months. Now, this will be the first launch, and while this is being delivered, we're also looking to create other flavours, if you like. So we're looking to get the level 5 accreditation for the diploma course by working with the universities listed there. We'll also underpin each module with an academic white paper to sort of validate what we're doing. And then we can create individual standalone modules. So let's say someone just wanted to take the module on the value toolkit, construction playbook. And we're also looking to get level 3 and 4 qualifications in there, and maybe deliver it through evening sessions. And we're also talking about to try and link it to apprenticeships. I think it's important that collaboration is spread as wide and as deep into the industry as we possibly can. So if we can reach out to people doing apprenticeships, people going through university, that's where we need to start to embed these behaviours at the very start. And we could also look at 12-week courses. So rather than 12 months, maybe the want from industry is to have a fast track and just do a module a week. So I think as we roll this out, we're very keen to learn from delegates and employers that have sent their delegates on the course as to what they think is the best way to embed this so that it suits the day job. And then finally, this is something that you'll probably be very familiar with. This is the Steve Green Collaboration Index. So what I've done here is I've mapped across the bottom, and it's the blue line, the construction output over the last 20 years. And then I've tracked onto that an orange line, which is purely Steve Green's personal opinion as to how collaboration has moved through the industry over the last 20 years. And this is based on my sort of personal experience, that turn of the century, if you like, as we came into the 2000s, we were into a different world. It was a collaborative world where we were talking about partnerships, we were talking about frameworks. We got forms of contract like PPC 2000, we got the NEC forms of contract. We were looking at open book projects. We were talking about pay and gain mechanisms. And as mentioned before, everyone was very interested in the construction excellence KPIs. You know, where you were against the benchmark was important to a business. Now, unfortunately, 2008, we all know a recession hit. And the course that we've been talking about, we actually did in 2010, 2011. And part of that, we could see off the back of recession that the collaborative working was starting to dwindle away. And as Andrew said, I think they only ran a couple of years of the course, and it sadly wasn't enough to embed these behaviours in the industry. What we've seen since is the industry taking off, and it was almost like, well, we don't need to collaborate, so everything's good. So collaboration drifted away. But this current slice of time is really interesting, isn't it? As we went into the pandemic and construction dipped, obviously it didn't dip as much as other industries. We've seen some fantastic examples of collaboration. We've seen the Nightingale hospitals. We've seen the video about the Construction Leadership Council, how the whole industry embraced the site operating procedures. So this rather ironically, off the back of the pandemic, is an opportunity, and it's a fantastic opportunity, and it's an opportunity that the whole industry must embrace. So let's get this course out there. Let's spread it out as wide and as deep as we possibly can. And let's change the industry for the better, because God knows we need it. I think anyone who'd worked through the collaborative phase knows how good it was. You felt good going to work. You've got a buzz of working with people and everyone working in the right direction. I think this course could change the face of the industry if we can just spread it out wide enough and everywhere. Okay, that's my piece done.
Thank you, Steve. If you'd like to stop sharing, what I'd like to do now is ask all the speakers, if you would, to put your cameras on and unmute yourselves, because I'm going to see if we've got any questions. So folks, if you have got any questions for any of our speakers, would you kindly go to Slido and use the Q&A section there. We have one question. I'm going to start with one for you, Rob. Rob, a question for you. Why, in your view, have the Nightingale behaviours reverted so quickly to past long learned type? Is it because the client is focused on cost, not quality?
I think there's a lot of reasons for it, some bigger than others, but yes, cost over quality is probably the number one cause. That hindered by procurement processes, although the two jobs I spoke about were under the same framework. One was procured in a completely cost plus environment, where the other did have a GMP. So there was a limit on cost, but the Nightingale was delivered cheaper than the one with a cost limit. So I'm not entirely sure that the cost is a reason, more of an excuse for a lack of collaboration.
It's interesting, Rob. A few years ago, when we had the Dawlish disaster, I organised a conference with Network Rail, and they brought their supply chain along to talk about how they'd put the rails back in place very quickly. And that was a very good collaborative working story. And I asked the question after the presentations if they had taken the best practice, which they'd learnt in that very short period of time, and had implemented it on future jobs. And the question came back, no, they'd reverted to type. So I think, unfortunately, this is a common story that seems to be apparent throughout the sector, which is a real shame. I've got a question here from Martin Jones, who is bringing it up to date with a very topical topic, which is the cladding scandal. So he's asking that collaboration is great, but how do we adopt it retrospectively to sort out the cladding scandal? Who'd like to have a go at that? Steve, do you want to have a go at that? You're in the hot seat.
No, not really. Thank you, Andrew.
I just thought you're a contractor of many years.
Yeah, when I saw it in the chat, I thought, oh,
not me, you thought.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good, and it's like any issue like this, isn't it? You see some developers stepping up to the plate and sort of holding their hand up and saying, yeah, I need to take some responsibility for this. And it's interesting because in terms of Grenfell, there were so many parties that were involved. You struggle to find an innocent party. But to pull everyone together, I think, as I say, it's fantastic that some developers have stepped forward and said, yeah, I'll take my responsibility here. But there's an expression we always use in Lean: it's better for 100 people to take one step forward than it is one person to take 100 steps. So I suppose what I'm saying is you can't collaborate on your own. So you need people to drive it, but you need to try and bring everyone along. But it's a good question. I think if we were good at collaborating, the industry would have healed itself after Grenfell.
I mean, for my own point of view, if we can't do this now, then we never will, because the last 12 months has shown us what we can do, what we should do. And I think there's universal agreement that the industry coming out of COVID has not got to be the one that went in. So I've got a question now, which I'd like to put to you, Howard, if you would, because it's really about the survey. We're getting quite a lot of comments in the chat box about the survey, about asking maybe it should be more in depth, asking more in-depth questions. So where do you think we should take this from here? As you said, some very interesting results, but what do you think is the next phase?
I think it's, if people would have partaken today, that would form maybe the beginning of a research base, because I do agree how people answer it quickly, etc., probably is worth digging into a bit more. Certainly, I would like to do that. If people are keen to do that, I think hands up. And if you are, please put your name in the chat, and we'll send out some more in-depth information.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Jane, I'm going to put the next question to you, if you don't mind. It's actually addressed to Rob, but I'd like you just to step back a few months to when you were a client, because there's a question here about a lack of willingness by the client to change. Are clients afraid of collaboration, what it might mean, what it might lead to?
I think some are, yes. I think there's work here on all sides to be able to come together. I think some people still very much have the idea that a contractor is just out there to make as much as he can, doesn't actually want to collaborate, whereas it's probably a bit of that in reverse, that the client needs to change their culture and their way of working to enable collaboration to truly happen. And I think the examples, as Rob was talking about with the hospitals, where they've sort of reverted back, and a lot of that is about governance. It's about the fear of doing something different during COVID. I think people were happy just to react and do stuff, but then back into the day job, people are back into their old behaviours. So I think it's something that, there's work needed on both sides to enable true collaboration going forward.
Okay, thank you. We're almost at the hour, so there aren't any more questions, which is perfect timing. So just a few final comments from me before we leave you for lunch. Once again, final reminder, if you want a CPD certificate for the last hour session on collaborative working, go to www.mypropass.co.uk, and the code for today is CE-454. The discussion, the code and the pass website and so on are given in the chat box. So please do go there if you want to get a CPD certificate. I'd like to thank, as I always do, Howard and Abraham for so ably hosting the webinar today. And also to our speakers, Jane, to Rob, to Steve and Mark. Thank you for giving of your valuable time and indeed your knowledge to help us. I would ask all of you on the call today to consider, if not yourself, someone that you think might appreciate knowing about this diploma. As Mark and Steve have said, we hope to have it available for public consumption, so to speak, just after Easter, for a start in September. We've already got 3 people signed up, funnily enough, without even promoting it. So I think we're on to a winner, but we would like the support of people here today, and also obviously the wider CE community. Next week, we're having a week off because it's Good Friday. But the week after that, we're coming back with a big one. We're coming back with Mark Farmer on the 9th of April. So he's always good to listen to. So make a note in your diary for 12 o'clock on Friday, the 9th of April to listen to Mark Farmer. But right now, the time is exactly 1 o'clock. It's Friday, the 26th of March. And for me, Andrew Carpenter, it's time to say, have a great afternoon. Cheerio now. Bye-bye.